Hello, and welcome to Ranger in Time, Race to the South Pole, a book by Kate Mesner. In this video, we read chapters 1 through 3 from Ranger in Time, Race to the South Pole. Listeners are encouraged to follow along in their books. Chapter 1, Stowaway. November 29, 1910. Jack Nin packed the wooden crate with potatoes and cabbages. He loaded it into a cart and hitched up his horse, Feitu. Then they started up the path along the New Zealand coast. It's a short journey to Port Chalmers. There we will sell our goods to the polar explorers, Jack said. They will leave for the South Pole with Nin family vegetables in the ship's hold. Feitu gave a whinny. Jack leaned forward and stroked the star-shaped patch between the horse's eyes. The name Feitu meant star in Maori, the language of Jack's mother. But Jack and his brothers rarely spoke that language aloud. They didn't speak Chinese outside of the house either. Jack's father had insisted on English. Being half Maori and half Chinese already brought enough trouble. Jack's father had died a year ago. Now his mother struggled to run the family's market garden with her 4 boys. They sold their potatoes, cabbages, tomatoes, and onions to the Chinese greengrocers in Dunedin. But the Nins were struggling. Some people in New Zealand said that Chinese men like Jack's father had stolen their jobs. They urged their neighbors not to do business with Chinese market gardeners. Jack hoped the explorers would buy the vegetables he'd brought. Every little bit helped. When Jack arrived at the harbor, a big ship was tied to the docks. Dogs yapped and howled. Men loaded sacks of coal and tugged ponies into stalls on the deck. "Excuse me," Jack called to a man carrying a sack over his shoulder. "Are you from the ship?" "I am," the man said. He had brown hair and a stubble of beard. "Might you purchase goods for your journey? My family has the finest vegetables you'll ever find in Dunedin." Jack pulled a folded up piece of paper from his pocket. He'd made a sign for the Nin Market Garden, with drawings to show all of the vegetables. Sketching felt like magic to Jack. He loved filling blank paper with objects that looked real enough to touch. "Perhaps some potatoes or cabbages," Jack said. The man laughed. "We're headed to Antarctica, my friend. It's a 5-week voyage to the continent, and who knows how many more before we reach the South Pole. Fresh vegetables won't keep. We need our space for biscuits and pemmican, dried beef and fat that'll last far longer than your cabbages." Of course, Jack said. How foolish he was not to realize that. "But," the man went on, his eyes had a lively sparkle as he shifted the sack to his other shoulder, "we may be interested in some of your goods for a feast before we depart. Wait here." The man carried his load to the ship and returned with some money. Jack unloaded his crate from the horse cart and accepted the coins. "Thank you," he said. He knew he should start for home. There was work to be done, but he couldn't stop staring at the tall masted ship. It buzzed with activity and adventure. "You think you'll reach the pole?" "I'm sure of it," the man grinned. "You'll see my name in the newspaper when we return. Apsley Cherry Garrard, right along with the famous Captain Scott." Jack imagined what it would be like to travel to a place no one had ever seen. It made him think of his grandfather, who'd come to New Zealand to work in the Otago gold mines as a young man, so he could send money to his family in China. Jack wished he could help his mother that way, but the mines had been cleared of their gold long ago. Jack looked at the big ship and wondered if there might be another way to help. "Do you need more workers?" he asked. The man shook his head. Thousands came forward when Captain Scott put out his call for workers. I was lucky to be chosen myself. The man looked back at the ship. "When we depart, we'll be a crew of 65 men, along with 33 dogs and 19 ponies to pull the sleds." "I see. Thank you, then." Jack turned back to his horse. He couldn't stop thinking about his grandfather's courage setting off for a new land to help his family, and he couldn't stop thinking about his own Fanau. Fanao is family in Maori, but it was more than Jack's mother and brothers. It was his extended family and the spirits of his ancestors. Jack had a responsibility to all of them. What if he snuck onto the ship and hid until it was far from port? He could show Captain Scott and the others what a strong worker he was. Surely they would accept him as a cabin boy. Then he could earn money for his family. His brothers could manage the market garden without him for a time, and while he was gone, his mother would have one less mouth to feed. He would return home in a few weeks, or months perhaps. Jack didn't know how long it might take to go to the South Pole after they reached land, but the longer he soaked up the excitement at the harbor, the more he wanted to go. Jack searched the crowd until he spotted a familiar face. Pak Keyoung, Jack called. The boy was a little younger than Jack, the son of the greengrocers who did business with the Nin family, so he and Jack had become friends. Jack took a coin from his pocket and held it up. I have a job that I must do. Will you take Feitu home for me? Tell my mother I am going on a trip to earn money that will help our family. The boy agreed, accepted the coins, and took Feitu's reins. Give these to my mother, Jack said, and handed the boy the rest of the coins. Tell her there will be more when I return. Then Jack headed for the pile of coal sacks being loaded onto the boat. He hoisted one over his shoulder. It was heavy, but Jack was strong from hauling vegetables. He went straight to the boat, as if he'd been hired to carry coal like the other men. But when Jack tossed the sack onto the deck, he didn't return to shore. He slipped past the coal sacks to the pony stalls. When no one was watching, he ducked behind a crate of horse feed. Jack crouched low and still. He waited for what must have been more than an hour. His legs cramped. Every time someone walked by, his heart jumped into his throat. Finally, the ship's great horn gave a blast. Jack peered out from behind the crate. The explorers kissed their wives goodbye and waved them back to shore. The band played, the crowd cheered, and the Terra Nova pulled away from the dock. Chapter 2, Snowballs and Squirrels. Ranger, catch! Luke packed a big snowball and tossed it high over the yard. Ranger bounded through the new snow, leaped into the air, and caught it in his teeth. He chomped down, and the snowball exploded in pieces. Some of them stuck in Ranger's fur. Ranger has a beard, Sadie laughed. You look like Grandpa, she said, and brushed the fluffy white snow off Ranger's chin with her mitten. Just then Ranger caught a scent. Squirrel! There it was, underneath Mom's bird feeder. Ranger took off running, but the squirrel raced through the snow and up a tree. Ranger barked up at it. Luke laughed. Poor Ranger, missed another one. Ranger loved chasing squirrels more than almost anything. They were the reason he failed his test to become a search and rescue dog, even though he'd done all of the training. To be a search and rescue dog, you had to ignore squirrels, even when they were right there, giving off their wonderful, swishy-tailed smells right under your nose. Ranger chased them every time. If a real person needed help, he knew he'd be able to follow directions. But that wasn't good enough for the search and rescue trainers. So Ranger didn't get to go on any real searches. He'd had lots of practice searching and rescuing, though. He'd searched for people in the muggy woods of summer and sniffed out people in the slush and ice of winter. Ranger could find a scent even when the person was buried in snow. Sometimes his paws got icy during winter training. Ranger liked summer searches better. I'm getting cold, Luke said. Want to go in for some hot cocoa? And cookies, Sadie said. I'll race you to the house. Ranger didn't drink cocoa, but he was ready to go inside. Also, he loved the cookie pieces that Sadie slipped him under the kitchen table. So Ranger raced too. His paws sank deep in the new snow, but he stayed by Luke's side all the way to the door. When Luke opened it, the warm air smelled like chocolate. Luke and Sadie's mom set a plate of oatmeal cookies on the table. Ready for a snack, she said. Luke and Sadie changed out of their snow pants in the mudroom while Ranger got a drink from his water dish. He was just about to follow them to the kitchen when he heard a humming sound coming from his dog bed. Ranger went to his bed and pawed his blanket out of the way. Beneath it, he found the antique first aid kit he dug up in the family garden. The old metal box had made this sound before. Once it had happened when a boy named Sam and his family needed Ranger's help on a long journey. Another time, the box hummed when a boy named Marcus was in trouble in a big arena far away. And it had also made the sound when a girl named Sarah was about to leave on a long, dangerous trip. Ranger had helped those children and brought back treasures from his time away. He kept them tucked under his blanket in his dog bed. There was a quilt square Sam had given Ranger when they said goodbye, a strange long leaf from the boy in the arena, and a soft feather from the Sarah girl. Beside those things sat the old metal first aid kit, and now the box was humming again. Ranger nuzzled its worn leather strap over his neck. The humming grew louder, and the box warmed at his throat. At first, Ranger could still hear the sounds of the hot chocolate mugs clinking in the kitchen, but soon the noise from the box was so loud that it drowned out everything else. Light began to spill from the cracks in the box. White hot light. It was so bright that Ranger had to close his eyes. When he opened them, it was raining. It wasn't home rain, like the kind Ranger watched from the porch swing with Luke and Sadie. The rain was wild, blowing, and the floor under Ranger's paws was moving, lurching back and forth so much he could hardly stand. The hot chocolate smell from the kitchen was gone. The air here smelled of salt and sea and wind. It smelled of wooden crates, wet animals, and men. It smelled of panic. "Strap down the fuel," a man shouted. "Lower the topsail," someone else hollered. "I can help," called a boy as he hurried over the deck. Ranger caught his scent, a mix of sweat, horses, and hay. "Watch out," screamed a man, and a big sack tumbled down the heap on the deck. It washed across the deck on a sloshing wave and flew toward Ranger. He jumped out of the way just in time, but the sack knocked the boy's feet out from under him. Ranger barked. The boy cried out and disappeared over the side of the boat. Chapter 3: Storm on the Terra Nova. Ranger raced across the deck. Another wave broke over the rail and swept his paws out from under him. The water sent him sliding over the weathered boards. Finally, Ranger caught his footing. Where was the boy? Ranger sniffed the heavy, wet air. It was full of smells: sea and coal, men and fear. Ranger made his way across the rocking ship. The scent he was tracking grew stronger. Ranger looked down. There! The boy had caught hold of a thick rope. He was hanging on, swinging over the edge of the ship. Every time it dipped on a wave, his legs plunged into the sea. His hands were raw and red. His eyes were wide with panic. Ranger barked. In search and rescue training, he'd learned to follow a scent to find the person in trouble. Then he barked to give an alert, so Luke and Dad would come. They'd give Ranger hugs and say, "Good dog," and then they would go home. This plunging and rocking boat was a long way from home. Ranger barked again, but no one paid attention. The wind and waves were too loud. He stumbled over the deck and jumped up on a man who'd bent down to lift a sack. "Whoa!" The man looked at Ranger, then hollered, "We got another dog loose." The man lifted his sack and turned away. Ranger barked a third time. He had given the alert. The boy needed help. Why wasn't the man coming? Ranger barked and pawed at the deck. The man hurled the sack overboard and turned. "What is it, dog?" He followed Ranger to the far railing. "Good Lord," the man said as another wave crashed over the boat. He leaned over the railing, held on with one hand, and extended the other as low as he could. "Grab my hand," he called down to the boy. A few seconds later, the man leaned back and heaved the boy onto the deck. The boy coughed, choking on seawater, but he was safe. Who was he? Ranger looked around the boat. Who were all of these men? Why were they in this windy, wild place? "I don't know who you are," the man said, pulling the boy to his feet, "but when this gale has passed, the captain will have words with you." The boy coughed and shivered, but he stood tall. "I am a good worker," he said. "You're a child. Hauling coal sacks is a man's work. Stay out of the way." Jack knew he had to prove himself quickly. He pushed past the man and hoisted a coal sack high above his head. It was heavy, but no more than the vegetable crates he loaded every day. Does the captain want all the loose sacks overboard? Jack swayed under the weight as the ship creaked and dipped beneath his feet. The man looked surprised, but he nodded. Otherwise, they'll slide around and break loose more important cargo, he said, and went back to work himself. Jack hurled the sack into the sea and took a moment to catch his breath. He looked down at the dripping golden dog that had probably saved his life. He looked different from the other sled dogs. Looks like you and I are both outsiders around here. Jack reached down and gave the dog a soggy pat on the head. What's that you're carrying? Jack eased the first aid kit from around Ranger's neck and opened it. Did someone put you in charge of bandages and things? The man from before walked by and heaved another sack of coal into the sea. Then he glanced down at the box in Jack's hands. That should be with our other supplies. Lord knows we've already lost enough in this storm. He packed Ranger's first aid kit away in one of the crates and turned to Jack. Get to work now. All night Jack worked quietly alongside the men while the waves sloshed over them. Ranger's fur was soaked and matted, but he stayed by the boy's side. Maybe when the storm ended, he could leave this dizzy, drenched place and go home. But the wind kept howling. The crew rushed over the deck, retying wooden crates to keep them from washing away. When the biggest waves crashed over the rail, the men clung to posts and ropes. Jack grabbed a mast with one arm and held tight to Ranger with the other. The ponies stumbled and fell in their stalls. The dogs didn't even have stalls. They were chained together on top of the coal sacks. One had already broken loose and drowned, so a man came and checked all of the chains. He tied Ranger up with the rest of the pack. Most of the dogs growled at Ranger, sized him up, and then ignored him. But one kept growling and barking at Ranger. Settle down, Osman, one of the crew members hollered. Osman sat down but never took his eyes off Ranger. Ranger stayed as far away from Osman as his chain allowed. The coal sacks were lumpy and uncomfortable. Ranger missed his dog bed. He missed Luke. We need help in the engine room, a man yelled. The pumps are broken and the water's rising. Jack and the other men raced down with buckets and formed a line to bail out their ship. Most of the men did 2-hour shifts, but Jack worked all night and through the next day until the waves died down and the darkness returned. Finally, a man named Evans fixed the pump, and there was great cheering. When he finished in the engine room, Jack climbed up to find Ranger. Most of the dogs chained on deck were shades of gray and white and black, but the one that had helped him was shaggy and golden. Dog! Jack scrambled over the heap, sat down beside the dog, and petted him on the head. Ranger wagged his dripping tail against the coal sacks. Now, who do we have here? A balding man with a serious expression towered over Jack. It was the captain, Jack guessed, from the way he'd commanded the others during the storm. My name is Jack Nin. Jack meant to sound brave, but his voice came out small and shaky. I came aboard in Port Chalmers. Without permission? The captain barked. Jack looked down. I did, sir, but I promise that I am a good, strong worker. And you hope to be kept on as a cabin boy now, instead of being fed to the sharks? Jack nodded and swallowed hard. He'd seen how easily the men tossed coal sacks over the railing. He probably didn't weigh much more than that. Ranger nuzzled the boy's hand. The captain looked at Ranger. This dog isn't part of the sled team. Is he yours? I don't know where he came from, but Jack looked at the dog. He saved me when the waves knocked me overboard. So maybe he is my dog in a way. Indeed, the captain sighed. This has not been the best day at sea. I've lost 2 ponies, a dog, 10 tons of coal, and 65 gallons of petrol. And now I learn that I have a stowaway. The captain shook his head. But very well, he said. The men told me how you helped during the gale, and I am thankful. You shall be our cabin boy. Expect to work hard on this voyage. Jack's heart leaped higher than the tallest wave. Yes, sir. The captain nodded. Welcome aboard the Terra Nova. And this wraps up the reading of chapters 1 through 3 from Ranger in Time, Race to the South Pole.